Hello, my dear students and the rest of the learners. Welcome to part 7 of an 8-part series of tutorials in fundamentals of developing a computer program, with our focus being on program documentation. My name is Meme JM, or you can simply call me Emily Swap. In this presentation, we are going to look at the introduction to documentation, the types of documentation guidelines, the methods of program documentation, program documents, and what we call the program documentation procedure. So what is documentation? Program documentation is the process of writing support materials, explaining how each and every part of the program can be used by users, installed by operators, or modified by the programmers. It shows what a program does and the conditions under which it can work. It is an integral part of every stage in order to help during future modification of the program. Program documentation is therefore not supposed to be treated as a standalone phase because documentation is supposed to be carried out at each stage, at every stage. Program documentation is therefore very important because it enables the user to understand the aspects of the program. It enables the programmer to keep track of all parts of a software or a program. It enables the programmer or technician to maintain the program easily. It enables the programmer to improve overall quality of the software. It assists in user training. It ensures knowledge decentralization, cutting costs and effort if people leave the system abruptly. Therefore, a complete program documentation should possess the following. 1, program specification. It should identify or define the problem, the inputs, files, and outputs. Number 2 is program design tools, which includes flowcharts, pseudocode, decision tables, amongst others. Number 3 is program listing, that is test data, test results, users notes, operators manual, summary, and the conclusion. So what are some of the types of documentation that a programmer can prepare? At various stages of development, multiple documents may be created for different users. This documentation can be of the following types. 1 is technical documentation. It is a documentation of actual programming components like algorithms, flowcharts, program codes, functional modules, amongst others. It provides detailed information about the technical aspects of a program or software, such as its architecture, data structures, and algorithms. This type of documentation is essential for developers and other technical teams. The second type is user documentation. It provides information to help end users understand how to use the software. The third one is API documentation. Provides information about how to use software library or application programming interface. This documentation typically includes descriptions of libraries, classes, methods, and properties, along with examples of how to use them. Number 4, or the fourth type, is external documentation. A brief set of documents that detail the design, development, and the structure of a program. This documentation is usually included at the top of the source code. The fifth type is class documentation. A block comment that precedes a class in an object-oriented programming language. This documentation includes the name of the class, the names of any other external packages, and the class's purpose. So, what are some of the guidelines that you need to adhere to when you're preparing a documentation? In order to create effective program documents, the programmer has to adhere to the following guidelines. 1, the documentation should be from the point of view reader. Documents should be unambiguous. There should be no repetition in the document. The industry standards should be used. The document should always be updated. Any outdated document should be phased out after due recording of the phase out. So what are some of the methods you can use to develop your program documentation? The two main methods of writing program documentation are internal documentation and external documentation. In internal documentation, it is all about making the source code readable and understandable as you write it in order to help other programmers understand the code statements. It includes indentation and spacing. This helps to easily identify the sections of the code in a program. Number two is adding comments. These are the explanatory non-executable remarks that are written in the source program to help the programmers understand the code statements. The third one is suitable variable names. The names that are used should be associated with what is being stored so that further explanation is not needed. When it comes to external documentation, this is purely preparing reference materials such as user manuals and tutorials printed either as booklets or recorded in a storage medium in soft copy. The final product from external documentation process is a program document which can be targeted to any of the three types of users who are the end users, the programmer, or the technician. What are some of the documents that you can prepare as part of documentation? A program document is any written text, illustration, or video that describe a software or a program to its users. Some of those important documents include the user manual. This manual describes instructions and procedures for end users to use the different features of the software. Number two is the operational manual. I repeat, operational manual. It lists and describes all the operations being carried out and their interdependencies. Then we have the design document. It gives an overview of the software and describes elements in detail. It documents details like data flow diagrams, entity relationships, or entity relationship diagrams, etc. Then we have requirements documents. It has lists of all the requirements of the system, as well as an analysis of viability of the requirements. It can have users' cases, real-life scenarios. Number 5 is testing document. It records test plan, test cases, validation plan, verification plan, test results, amongst others. The testing is one phase of software development that needs intensive documentation. Number 5 is list of known bugs. Every software has bugs or errors that cannot be removed because either they were discovered very late or are harmless or will take more effort and time than necessary to rectify. These bugs are listed with the program documentation so that they may be removed later. Also, they help users, implementers, and maintenance people if the bug is activated. So what are some of the sections of documentations or documents? The documentation for a simple program generally falls into 4 sections, which are the identification, the general specification, the user information, and the program specification. These are always included in the documentation for a program. So what do we have under identification? In identification, we have type of the program, the short statements for its function, the author, the date it was written, the language used and the version if relevant, and the hardware requirements. Under the general specification, we have a description of the main actions of the program under normal circumstances, the further specifications, the restrictions or limitations of the program, and references to any texts explaining any complex procedures, techniques used in the program. Under the user information, we have the format of input required, how to produce outputs and their layout, and detailed instructions on how to run the program. Under the program specification, we have the design of the program using structure charts or flowcharts, annotated diagrams listing, and testing procedure, including test data and expected output. So what is the procedure of preparing program documentation? The procedure for preparing a documentation for technical users is as follows. 1, determine what information is to be included. 2, decide how much of the documentation should be within the program code, how much should be separated from it. Number 3 is to choose the appropriate documentation tool. Well, the following is the procedure for preparing program documentation for end users. 1, determine the institutional reasons for your documentation. 2, understand the audience you are writing the documentation for. 3, determine the appropriate format for the documentation. 4, decide what form of documentation it should take. 5, choose the appropriate documentation tool. And with that, my dear students and the rest of the learners, we have come to the end of part 7 of this series. You can proceed and listen to part 8 of the series, in which we are going to learn about performing user training. Congratulations for learning part 7 of 8 on program documentation in Fundamentals of Developing Computer Program. You can access the rest of the parts in the series, as well as other computer or ICT videos, by clicking or tapping on MLSWAP ICT YouTube channel below this video. To subscribe to the channel, tap on subscribe button below this video on YouTube if it's not kindly reading and subscribed. For any further correspondence, kindly write it to us through the email mlswap@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening to me. Let's meet in part 8 of the series, and God bless.